I've started college again. I wonder if that's gonna impact my upload schedule in any way. Sup freaks, it's me, ya boy, back with more Batman! This seems to be you guys' favourite series. I've been getting loads of people genuinely invested in my funny little world, giving me feedback, asking me questions. I've even got a little bit of fan art, which has made my day literally every time I've seen it, so thank you guys. The amount of support I've been getting on this project that I'm genuinely passionate about has been awesome. So, without making you all wait any longer, here is the next batch of villains from the Batman comic I'm planning to make on AO3. Why do I sound so zesty? Guys, I cannot for the life of me resist making characters into scary women. I need to be sedated. I do have a pretty good reason for this new take on the character, and that's because my main inspiration for the newly named Hazel Carlo was inspired by the substance, so that's always a good sign. My favourite version of Clayface's backstories are the ones where he's depicted as a vain actor struggling to return to his role after an accident of some kind that left him with a facial deformity. I don't know the exact bits of media where this has been his given backstory, but I do at least know that he's been depicted in this way more than once. I've always found the pressures of fame and looking ungodly attractive in the acting industry a concept ripe with body horror potential, which is where the substance comes in, and something I knew I wanted to tackle at some point. This is the main reason behind why I decided to swap Clayface's gender for my interpretation of the character, as there are still so many pressures on specifically actresses on how they should and shouldn't look. This isn't to say there aren't similar pressures presented for male actors, but it would be ignorant for me to say that women aren't treated significantly differently, and in a lot of cases much harsher, hence why I wanted to portray the woman's perspective in my rewrite. I want my version of Clayface to be the physical embodiment of body dysmorphia. She's this mass of twisting, morphing shapes that can't keep the same form for too long, to represent the pointless pursuit of keeping the same appearance forever. The more she tries to morph into a more appealing form, the harder it becomes to keep said form. My version of Clayface was an actress who was slowly getting less and less roles the older she got, despite still being incredibly beautiful. She was good friends with Bruce, who decided to start funding a movie she was going to be starring in, making her comeback, and things were finally starting to look up. However, as previously stated, Hazel got into an accident which ended up badly scarring her face, leaving her distraught. Bruce still fought for her to remain in the project, but seeing no other option herself, Hazel would drop out. This is when she would be approached by Hugo Strange, offering her an experimental surgery free of charge that had the possibility to restore her to her former glory entirely if successful, and being as desperate as she would accept. However, after injecting Hazel with metahuman DNA, the experiment would go completely off the rails, turning her into the deformed mess of clay she is now. For her design, I wanted to go pretty straightforward with everything other than her face. I wanted her entire body to be this greyish-brown colour, with this thick, inky texture. For her full body, I gave her quite a few more limbs than normal, and at the bottom near her legs, I gave her these crab-like extra legs, because I just thought it looked neat. Honestly, my main rule for her design is just to add shit I thought looked creepy. I wanted her hair to be quite long and all-encompassing, like a big clay blanket surrounding her and merging with her skin. And I essentially just wanted to make her face look as creepy as possible. I wanted it to kinda look like there's still some human-esque parts hidden underneath the clay, so had her face look very sunken around the eyes and teeth to create depth. I also wanted to draw some other creepy variations to her face with the other expressions, as again, she can't keep the same form for too long. Here is the finished design for Hazel Carlo / Clayface.
Is that lit so my sensors spot a bear? I guess the kitties are still running away from you, huh? Just like your audience always was when you told your lazy jokes here. Someone's salty. Real or not though, people love me. Does anybody love you? If so.
Oh boy, have I been excited to talk about this devious little guy. So, Oswald Cobblepot has some pretty damn good interpretations of him, especially as of recent. I love the version from the 2004 cartoon, I love the recent version in the Batman 2022, but my absolute favourite would probably have to be the Gotham version. Hear me out! As far as Gotham performances go, the show is most well known for Jerome and Jeremiah, played by Cameron Monaghan. And while that's completely understandable, this performance for Oswald Cobblepot is on another goddamn level. Like, why does nobody talk about how good Robin Lord Taylor is in this role? And how haven't I seen him in anything other than this show? He's so good! I also really love being able to see the Penguin not starting off as powerful as he normally does, instead seeing him climb to power over the course of the story. It's just so good, and I want to take at least a little bit of inspiration for my version. I can't go too in depth because Penguin is going to be heavily featured in the first volume and I don't want to spoil everything, but I'm going to have my version of the Penguin start out seemingly quite powerful, being very involved in the crime problem in Gotham, but he is still only a high-ranking lackey for Falcone. Now, despite not being entirely loyal to Falcone, planning to betray him at some point with Maroni, who is his original boss and currently in Arkham after a drug bust, he is still under the thumb of two separate crime bosses and doesn't really have much of his own agency, which he couldn't hate more. If there's one thing my version of Oswald craves more than anything in the world, it's control. It's his driving motivation. Because of this, he's learnt to be cunning, manipulative, and cold when he needs to be. But again, I unfortunately can't go into too much depth because spoilers. Of all of the designs in this video, I quite like what I did for Oswald, but I would like to redesign him at some point. While I really like the style I gave him, I just want him to have a better silhouette and just generally look a bit more menacing than he ended up looking here. I also want to give his umbrella more mechanical details, as I like it when it sometimes doubles as a propeller for him. You know, when he like flies up, it doesn't matter. I wanted to give him more Victorian style clothing as I felt it fit him quite well, but I'll probably make it more detailed at some point. I gave him a big coat with fur around the neck, his classic top hat to match, and some purple trousers. I also decided to give him a Plague Doctor mask coloured like the face of a penguin because I think it looks pretty damn cool. I also replaced his classic monocle with a pair of purple tinted shades, but I'm not sure if I prefer the monocle or not. I want him to team up with the Riddler at some point, which I think I've already mentioned in a Tumblr post, insert shameless plug, as I really love their dynamic in most pieces of media and really want evil doomed old man Yowie in my comic, None of You Can Stop Me. I also would quite like to have him be a parallel to Bruce by giving him a similar backstory to him, but that backstory will have to be told another time. Here is the finished design for Oswald Cobblepot / Penguin.
You like my new toy? Cost me a fortune, but hey, you can't take it with you, right?
You came all this way. Watch the test. It's a hell of a freaking light show. You're gonna love this.
I'd say it's nice to see you again, Spider-Man, but it's not. Booming.
It's not always about the money, Spider-Man.
The Ventriloquist is a character that has taken a couple of different forms over the years, mostly due to the fact that the Ventriloquist isn't just one character. Not only is Scarface, the dummy, often portrayed as a completely different character to his host, but the Ventriloquist himself has been portrayed as 3 different characters over the years. Arnold Wesker, Peyton Riley, and Shauna Belzer. Of the 3 characters, I decided to use Peyton Riley for my version. Firstly, I felt that the themes in her story and her relationship with Scarface was the most interesting and something I was eager to build off of, and secondly, I feel that her design, that being the red dress and blonde hair, was the most iconic. One decision I struggled with when rewriting this character was what to do with Scarface. While what Scarface is has been changed a couple times depending on the interpretation, the most common is that Scarface is an alternate personality of whoever is controlling him at the time, which I don't want to do for a couple reasons. One is that I really don't like how often DID is used as an easy way to make a villain interesting. It's often very misinformed and always portrays people with DID as crazy and violent, plus it's just really overused. I'd be happy to portray a character with DID in my story at some point, as I found that there are very rarely any accurate or compassionate representations of systems in media, but I'd much rather have them be one of the protagonists rather than a villain. Another reason for why I don't like this explanation for Scarface is just that it doesn't make any sense. Like, why would every person that owns Scarface just adopt him as an alternate personality the second they come into contact with him? DID isn't a disease, you can't catch it. I mean, I'd get if Scarface is actually some sort of supernatural parasite that people just label as an alternate personality because of how misinformed they are on DID. That would actually be a cool concept and an interesting commentary on how DID is portrayed in media. Wait, I might do that actually. But no, apparently that's just how it works in the Batman universe, guys. Yay! What I really like the idea of is Scarface still being in Peyton's head, but instead of being explained by a real-life phenomena that doesn't bear any resemblance to the character, I want him to instead represent how trauma can control an individual long after the experience is over, especially when it comes to controlling and abusive relationships. I'm not going to go too in-depth on Peyton's new backstory, as it's going to be quite plot relevant and I don't want to spoil anything, but the concept of control and trauma will be a key aspect of her character, and one that will not only be a part of her relationship with Scarface, but also the character we'll be touching on next. For her design, I wanted to lean a lot more into her showbiz gimmick, while still keeping the most recognizable parts of her design, like the color palette. I decided to make her dress much more poofy to give it a more exaggerated silhouette. If the dress looks familiar in any way, that's probably because I decided to take heavy inspiration from Perfect Blue, as it was pretty much all I could think about when designing her. For her hair, I decided to make it quite wild and uneven to clash with the rest of her clean and flashy outfit and showcase a bit more of her real personality. I gave her long white socks and gloves and a nice red bow tie to match her dress. For Scarface, I kept his design pretty simple and similar to some designs he's had before. I kept the iconic mobster suit, fedora, and Tommy gun, but I also added 2 little demon horns to him, as he sort of acts like the demon on Peyton's shoulder. I also gave him a missing eye. Here is the finished design for Peyton Riley / the Ventriloquist.
Lost all my possessions. Think I'll just go have some pudding. He's lovely. They've been known to sing on Boxing Day, you know. Personally, I think you look a bit more devil-may-care this way, but it's up to you. I've never been to this part of the castle. At least not while awake.
The Dollmaker is a rather difficult character to talk about in a video, as pretty much everything I've written so far that's important to his character is far too plot relevant for me to talk about. I even had to keep his real name a secret, as his identity is a plot twist in the chapter he's featured in. Due to this, I'm kinda struggling to think about what to say, but I'll do my best. Firstly, I decided to base his location off of, once again, the Gotham show, as while I think his portrayal in the show is lacking a lot of his creepiness, I like the idea of him living on a remote island and taking Gotham citizens to perform his weird experiments on. His motivation is something I'm still deciding on, but I think if I want to link him with Peyton Riley, which I'll get into in a moment, I want his main motivation to be control. He wants to create the perfect being, one that is only perfect in his own eyes. He's a perfectionist, a control freak, things only being correct when he says they are. His relationship with Peyton is complicated, to say the least. The Dollmaker took Peyton in after escaping an abusive household, seeing a broken child and deciding to be the one to fix her, in his words. However, he molded her into a very disturbed person, one that relies on his word to do anything and uses violence as a coping mechanism. She acts as his right-hand woman, being the one to go to Gotham and organize the shipments of people, often prisoners, so that they can stay under the radar. She sees the Dollmaker as a father figure, but while he pretends to care for her as a person, he sees her less as a daughter and more as his favorite creation. A first draft, if you will. With his design, I would definitely like to do more with it in the future. While I think what I came up with here is a good starting point, I definitely want to make it just generally much creepier. I also have been toying with the idea of the Dollmaker sometimes experimenting on his own body, which I definitely want to make more clear in his design. I gave him a porcelain mask to look like a doll's face, and for his outfit I had him in a leather apron and other leather protective gear. I also added a bunch of stitch marks here and there. Here is the finished design for the Dollmaker.
I'll be here to help you out for the duration of your stay with us. Do you have a name? I can, I assure you. I'm your doctor, Dr. David. I'm here to help you, to treat you, to make it so you're less of a burden to everyone. And until I'm satisfied that we've reached that point, well, there's plenty here to keep you comfortable. Nothing you could say or do could cause me even a moment's inconvenience. Your anger is pointless, meaningless.
Last but certainly not least, we have the Ten-Eyed Man. Now, there's a fairly good chance that you haven't ever heard of this character before, so I'll give a brief description. The Ten-Eyed Man is a metahuman who sees not out of the eyes on his face, but through the eyes at the end of each of his fingers. I believe in the original story he went blind and took part in an experimental surgery to move his sight to the ends of his fingers, but in my version he was just born like that. For this character, I struggled less with his story and themes, and more with his design, as while the more recent depictions have a fairly engaging story, his most recent design is this. So, needless to say, very hard to top, and I'm not entirely convinced I did in this video. I was really tempted to just not change his design at all, as his most recent canon one is just so iconic, but I wanted to take a crack at something different, so I did my best. I still think it's not as good though. Before we get into that, I just wanted to go through the changes I made to his story real quick. So, Philip grew up in a metahuman facility, as most young metahumans do, but unlike the physical experiments most of them undergo, Philip was put under a mental experiment. The scientists wanted to see how the mind of a metahuman would develop if under constant, very obvious supervision. Philip was watched every second of every day of his life, with little to no entertainment or outlets, the only social interaction he would get being through a glass door when he would be delivered food. And it broke him, made him paranoid and resentful. For his design, I tried to do something kinda creepy and interesting by taking a picture of my own eye and using it on his mask. I wanted it to look kind of like a collage, but I'm unsure if I prefer it from the beaded mask he has canonically. For his outfit, I used the same black and orange colour palette, and I kinda went in the direction of giving him monk-esque clothes, as I felt it fit his vibes, but I don't know. I also wanted to lean a little bit further into his spider motif, so I gave him this spiderweb pattern on his top. I also gave him rather long brown hair with a grey streak and lots of bandages, some covering his eyes, or where his eyes would be. His pose was also partially inspired by the Pale Man from Pan's Labyrinth. Here is the finished design for Philip Reardon / the Ten-Eyed Man.
When you're this tired, sometimes stuff looks like it's moving when it's not. You hallucinate things that aren't there. Like you're being overwhelmed with information. I don't recall this happening. All I remember is how I felt at that time. It was like a weight lifted off my chest. Why was that again?
And there we have it, folks. One more batch of villains cooked up and ready to be served. I'm sorry this one took so long to get out. As I mentioned, I've recently started college again, which has been eating into my upload schedule, but I'm doing my best to lock in for you. So, with that being said, since I know most of you don't stay for the video outro anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!